as we travel together during final season. So exciting.
Final Four? It's not
Final Four. March Madness. I'm ahead. But it's very exciting to continue the shiur. This week's literally one of my favorite shiurim that I've researched and thought about probably for 15 years. Because it's something that I think, as much as the topic, what Eitan wrote about Brachot on Ben Chavero, it's part of the topic, but as I was discussing earlier with one of the guys, it's actually a little even more broad than that, which comes to what's the philosophy that I have in many mitzvot, how do I approach it? Which is when I'm 18, 19, 20, 21, and hopefully now even when I'm a little older than that, we still think like, why do I do certain mitzvot? And it's reflected in some of the answers about the brachot or the lack of bracha, and we'll see how it's connected to the parsha. And it's not even just general. You could say Parshat Mishpatim is Ben Chavero, it's Gufei Torah. There's actually even a Yerushalmi that you may have seen in the Avudraham, in the Or Zarua, that connects to a pasuk in Perach Chof Dalet also. But the truth is, the major source that I really wanted to connect it to is the Maharal. But before we get to the Maharal, the two extremes which you saw is why do I do mitzvot? So we're going to try to do here basically three approaches, right? There's going to be three approaches why we do mitzvot. And I'll explain what I say, but as I said, it might even be a bridge of Parshat Yitro and Mishpatim also. So it is the general question which you have in front of you in the sources that I think many of you got through, which is, is there a rhyme and reason for why don't we make brachot? There's questions in the nusach of the bracha, which is another fascinating shiur of, is it al mitzvah this or le mitzvah, lehadlik ner shel Chanukah or al mitzvah Chanukah? Is there rhyme or reason for that also? To the point that Tosfot in Masechet Pesachim, he said there is no rhyme and reason. The rabbi said no reason. Sometimes they said al, sometimes they said le. There's no rhyme and reason. But there's a major machlokus rishonim that actually say there is a reason why we would have a le versus al netilat yadayim, etc. The Rambam, the Rosh, the Rabbeinu David, etc. So too over here, the same idea here, which is why do we make or not make bracha? So the first source, for example, in front of you is the sheet of the Rashba, which is why the question there is why not make a bracha on tzedakah or gemilut chesed? And his first answer, just to get it off, was in the first source, ki kol mitzvah she'iev shalo b'gmar asiyata leheasod beino levein atzmo el tzricha acher imo. It's not totally dependent on you, it's dependent on somebody else. Ein mevorchen aleh, like tzedakah, bikur cholim v'chayotzi beh. Excuse me. She'im ein lekabel or she'ein rotzeh lekabel v'chein bikur cholim, if there's no sick person there to visit, or she'ein rotzeh, he doesn't want your visit, yev shor lalasato, and therefore ein mevorach alehem, you cannot force it. Meaning, it's not in your hand to make it is not in your hand to make that bracha, and therefore it can even become bracha l'batal. It's a general chakira, which is very interesting, which is within Ben Chaver, which connects to this machlok rishonim, which again is not the topic of this year, but I'll just throw it out there once we even said the Rashba, which is most people think that what's the purpose of doing these mitzvot of Ben Chaver? It's what's called the tachlit, which means I want to visit a sick person. So if I went to go visit a sick person and I said, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kirsham tzov v'tzivanu l'bakir cholim, and then I walk into Joe's room and Joe's not there. Right? That is called the bracha batal, because Joe was sick, and I thought, right? And the whole purpose is for what? Is for the sick person to get better by me going there, taking away one whatever, of his illness, right? 1/60th of his illness, and that's one way to do it. The truth is, there's a major chakira that might not be the only way to look at Bikur Cholim. It might be one angle of it. What's the other way to look at it? The other way to look at it is not the tachlit, but it's actually the maisa, right? It's for me. It's for the person who's being mivaker. It's not actually, right? The mitzvah is called Bikur Cholim, right? It's not just a incidental idea that I have to go visit the Cholim, but actually the maisa in itself is actually very important, right? It's important for me, right? In developing, it's not only so altruistic, for the person to actually be better, it's actually for me to be a better person also. And that might be a second angle to Bikur Cholim, and maybe again, why other Rishonim wouldn't agree with the Rashba. They wouldn't agree with the Rashba because what? Because maybe it's not Bikur Cholim then. Again, it's not saying lecharchila to be not very wise and make the bracha and then walk in and know Joe's not going to be there, but say, no problem. It's not a Bikur Chol, it's not a bracha v'atala because I know I'm becoming a better person. You're like just being stupid, right? But there's that concept. But again, that's not our discussion for tonight. It's a fascinating discussion within certain mitzvot. If I wanted to skip ahead, I brought you the Avudraham because I found it and I think it's cool. Also, it's another answer, which is the concept of Ein Lo Shiur would be another. The concept of wanting to make a bracha on tefillah, for example, right before davening, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu tzavanu al mitzvah tefillah, the Avudraham. One of the Rishonim say again, similar. It's not only this is like almost on a certain level very similar. It's the opposite of the Rashba. It's the Rashba himself says, why do you make the bracha on the Haggadah? Right? The idea is that ein lo kitzvah, right? There's no set amount, or it's endless, and therefore they didn't want to institute the bracha. The truth is, I want to get to now, I guess what I really wanted to get to, which is to talk about kibbud avim for a second. Let's talk about kibbud avim. We just finished it in Yitro, and again, it's going to come back to our question of how do I fulfill the mitzvah? Why do we talk about it? So we know that there's the dibrot in Yitro and there's in Vayetchanan. So let's talk about the pasuk for a second. In Yitro, Parachaf, what does the pasuk say? Everyone help me out, please. It says, Kabeir et avicha ve'et imecha, right? Laman yarichun yamecha. Laman yarichun excuse my penmanship, or lack thereof. Laman yarichun yamecha al hadama hazot, right? Al hadama asher natan. Asher. Say it again. Hashem Elokecha. Right, no lach. I heard a shiur coming here. Whole question of why you're allowed to say certain psukim by heart, even though usually dvarim shebechtav yata if shar the omram balpeh, you can't say it balpeh, right? That's it seems to be a gemara, open and shut, right? So it's a question that brings down. The Mordechai brings that on Masechet Gitin. We say az yashir by heart. We say karbanos by heart. The answer is brought down by Rebbeinu Tam is the things that we know. The things that we all know, you could say it by heart. So, like Aser to Dibra, yeah, we all know by heart. But I guess maybe I should go like the other answer, not like Rabbeinu Tam. First of all, just a little Tzioni plug here. Kabir tavicha v'etimecha, leman yarichun yamecha al hadama. Anybody ever think about that before? The truth is, it's not, to be honest, some unfortunately say al hadama is talking about olam haba, that idea. But there is the Ibn Ezra here, just to let you know, right? It's like weird, right? What's the connection between Eretz Yisrael and kibbud avim, right? You have to be really wear a really big white kippah, or a big flowery skirt, yeah. Like what? What I'm saying? Like what is this all about? What I'm saying? What is this all about? What is this al hadama, right? So the Ibn Ezra says, just like if you do what you're supposed to do, the reward, which he says the pshat and the pasuk, the reward is, number one is the man yarichun yamecha, Iran yarichun yamecha, you'll have long days. And number two, al adama, guess what's going to happen? You're not going to get thrown out of Eretz Yisrael. Right? There's Rav Avadia has a long tshuva about it also. But again, back to our regularly scheduled program. Asher Hashem Elokecha noten lach. Now, we go to Vayetchanan. Right? In Parakeh and Vayetchanan, I think it's Pasuk Tet Zayin, if I'm not mistaken. What does it say there? But it says, what does it say? Oh, you have to force me to look it up. Noob, Dave, what do you say? You're gonna force me to look it up? Yeah. Anybody have a Tanakh in front of them? Thank God. Thank God I'm charged here. That no, it's okay. I have also here. I was expecting people to know by heart. So again, thank God we have other answers besides Rabbeinu Tom's answer. Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha. Okay, and here's the difference, right? In Parakeh it says Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha. What's the next words? Ka'asher tzivcha Hashem Elokecha. And then it says, continuation, it's Parasik Ted Vav, not Ted Zayin. Leman yarichun yamecho, leman yitavlach al adama asher Hashem Elokecha no temach. Okay, he adds the man yitavlach, but for me, the question is, what is this? Kasher tzivcha Hashem Elokecha. Right? Why does it have to tell me that in Vayet Chanan? What is this Kasher tzivcha Hashem Elokecha? So if you saw in front of you, so I knew about this Aruch HaShulchan, I guess, when I was teaching the halachot of Kibbud Avim in different shiurim. But before that, Rabbeinu Bachai says something that if you saw, which I only saw recently, excuse me, Rabbeinu Bachai says in the source in front of you, talking about the mitzvah of tzitzit, then he said, "Va-mitzvot ha'elu," in the Sefer Kara Kemach, the mitzvah which we're commanded to sanctify ourselves in, hina mitzvot hamikubalot, shehein ikar kedusha. And right, Rav Saji Gaon says it in a different language. He calls it mitzvot shmiiyot, right, shmimi mitzvot, or godly mitzvot, if you will, as opposed to, and here Rabbeinu Bachai calls it mitzvot mikubalot. והוא שחז"ל חכמי האמת תיקנו לנו לברך עליהן אשר קידשנו מצוותיו וציוונו ועל מצוות המקובלות האלו נקראו ישראל בסיני. That's why we're called a goy kadosh. Last week's parasha שנאמר, I don't know what Dvarim Tedvav there is, ואתם תהיו לי, or maybe ואתם תהיו לי ממלכת כהנים וגוי קדוש, last week's parasha. כי בקיום המושכלות, which is what we would call civil laws, right? Lo tirtzach, lo tignov, etc. Lo yikra am goy kadosh. Ki gam ha'akum she'im goy over eitzot ve'im hem tvuna, halo hem mitaskim b'ktzat ha'mitzvot ha'muskalot. V'gam ha'chachamim lo tiknu levarech al muskalot klal. Ki ein ikar bracha v'akdusha al mitzvot ha'mekubalot. So Rabbeinu Bachai says, very, very interesting, that the mitzvot, that the brachot are only for the, what we would call mitzvot that are unique to us. Now, the truth is, there is, if I'm not mistaken, that there is a sefer. I didn't have a chance to remember the name. I think something like Neta Gavriel or something like that. Within why there's no bracha of Baruch Hashem Asher Kiddushanu Mitzvah Tzivanu Al Mitzvat Nisuin, and he gives that exact answer also. Even though there is the concept called Sheva Brachos, and at least according to the Shita of the Rambam, Sheva Brachos is the Birchas Nisuin. Okay, but there is no bracha of al mitzvat nisuin. It gives the exact same answer.
Well,
there is
no mitzvah to get married.
What?
Technically, there is no mitzvah.
That's a major machlokas, right? Major machlokas, right? Whether the mitzvah is peravu or is there a mitzvah to get married? True, right? But the question is, assuming that there is a mitzvah, again, like I said, according to the Rambam, if the birchat nisuin is a birchot mitzvah, that would be against what you said, right? But good, we're in Judaism. Good, Baruch Hashem. Machloikis. So what the answer he said is the kiddushin we have a bracha because that's unheard of in the Goyish world. Our kiddushin is not engagement, right? That's not our kiddushin. Kiddushin is the concept of you're miyuchad and you're asur to etc., right? Miyuchad and miyuedet, etc., all different languages. That's something that's unique to Am Yisrael. But marriage, what nisuin, most people define marriage as a state of ishut, a state of being together, relationship. That's something that's not unique to Judaism. And that, he would say, there's no bracha, which is exactly what Rabbeinu Bachai says here. Comes to Aruch HaShulchan, says something very similar. But I think he flips it up a little bit. He says in Yoredei Siman Reish Mem, L'fi News Daiti, why is there no bracha on Kibbud Avim? Nire, he says the Kevan. Right? He makes an important distinction, but he still says the same idea. near the cave of the kol vilashon osimotam. Everybody has kibbut aveim. Nihish osim mibnei haseichel. They do it because it's civil. It's the right thing to do. Mikovakom kevan sheba asiyah shavim heim. Since in practice it's the same thing, and the hefresh, the difference is just machshava shebalev she'elu osim mibnei tzivoy hakadosh baruch hu ve'elu mibnei haseichel. Therefore, lo tiknu bracha al zeh she'omru asher kedisharim savet tzivanu. Okay. If you wanted to see it a little more clearly, he talks about it also. And while making a ma'akeh, he talks about, again, Ha'isha Yisraeli in Siman Tov Chav Zayin. Mechuyav lasot gam mitzvot sichliot. Lo b'nei ha'seichel, el b'nei tzivoy hakadosh baruch hu. As it says in Ekev, Haya Ekev tishmun eta mishpatim ha'ela, u'shmartem va'asitem otam. Klomar, afilu the mishpatim, why are you going to do them? Because Hashem said to do it, and not because of like everybody else to do it. Right? Ela keshari mitzvot hashmiyot gali mitzvot. Mikol makom, nevertheless, kedushat Israel eino nikar kokach. Our uniqueness, our sanctity, is not as noticeable. It's not as salient. It's not as blatant at all as it is in the shmiyot. Therefore, they didn't institute brachot there, right? Etc. And that's what he talks about. Now, besides the distinction, he says something very important. How the Aruch HaShulchan explains these psukim. You know why it says kasher tzivcha Hashem lokecha? Truth is, I probably didn't even quote this. I think there's another sif in the Aruch HaShulchan, if I'm not mistaken, that he says it. I didn't even quote the whole thing. He says it black and white. He basically says, you know why it says kasher tzivcha Hashem lokecha? Do not think that the reason why you're doing the mitzvah is because it's a mitzvah from the seichel, just like everybody does it that way. You must do the mitzvah what? Kasher tzivcha Hashem lokecha. So the point is a whole philosophy out there that's how you should do all mitzvot. You should do all mitzvot. Why? Kasher tzivcha Hashem lokecha. And people would say, Rav Chaim Shmulevitz is very into that type of philosophy, right? And because once you start playing around, all of a sudden, right, who knows what's going to happen? But bottom line, one way to say, why do I do mitzvot is because Hashem told me to. Now again, the modern mind, especially when you become a high school modern mind, why do I do mitzvot? Kacha. You know, like, kacha is a lo tshuva, right? But, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's what it is. Kasher tzivcha Hashem elokecha. Right? That's a tzivot Hashem, kasher tzivcha Hashem elokecha. Now, the other extreme, which will, and therefore, and that's why, again, it addresses that point. Not enough to make a bracha because the difference is only in our machshava, how you do it, but that's the point. In the machshava, it has to be kasher tzivcha Hashem lokecha. If I skip to the other extreme I asked you to see is at the end source, which was the Sri Dayesh. The Sri Dayesh, Michael Yaakov Weinberg, said, why don't we make a bracha on mishloach manot? There's a whole big discussion whether it's the same idea as the Rashba or not. We're not going to get into that. Or if I give mishloach manot, what?
There's no amount? No,
not an amount. The question is not in my hand. Let's say I say, here, well, I can't do this Sarah. But here, David, here's my mishloach manot. And you say, I hate you. You know? But I gave it, right? What? That's why you need the shliach, right? It's a big question. It's brought down in the Binyan Sian, Rav Yaakov Ettlinger, Mishnah Berurah brings down, even though it says mishloach manot, right? And if you're American, you'd say shalach manos, right? But it says mishloach manot or mishloach manos. You know, the question is, do you need a din shliach or not? What's that all about? Also, which would be interesting, since what the Chassam Sofer, for example, says, or Shlomo Alkubitz says that the whole purpose of mishloach manot is to what? Show the love, so dafka send it through a shliach. It's kind of opposite in logic. But okay, so ask the Sri Dayesh or Michael Yaakov Weinberg, why is there no bracha in mishloach manot? And he says some beautiful things. We'll read it very quickly together. Vote nearly. Shemishloach manot hi laharbot shalom v'ava re'ut. There's a machlokas. What's the point behind the Chachamim instituting Mishloach Manot? Is it to help one with the Suda, right? As the Trumas Hadeshin says, to help one eat their Suda. So you give them food to the Suda. The other reason, Rav Shlomo Alkabetz, the famous author of the Lechadodi, okay, he wrote a sefer on the Megillah and in Purim called the sefer Baal Manot Levi. And also the Chassam Sofer says, no, the reason why we have Mishloach Manot is laharbot shalom ava v'reut. Show, to increase our love. Why do we need to do that? Why do we need to do that? Because Haman, the big the big castigator, the big prosecuting attorney, right? As the Gemara says, there's no greater mikadrig. Is what does he say? Is we're an am mifuzar mifurad. We're a scattered nation. Therefore, what do we have to do? They instituted, we have to do it out of love. Explains the Sridiyation goes a step further. Normally the Gemara in Kiddushin tells us a very important rule. Better, which is a very fascinating discussion also, better or greater is one who is commanded and fulfills the mitzvah more than what? The one who volunteers. Right? Instinctively, we always think, what are you talking about? Right? Volunteering is much better, right? When I'm commanded to do it, it's coming from yourself when you're volunteering, so like, you feel good, right? So that's really what the Maharal says. The Maharal says, before we get to the Maharal says, well, this is what we call parenthetical. Okay, just to understand Gadol Mitzvah V'Oseh. Tosfos in Mesachas Kiddushin says that the reason Gadol Mitzvah V'Oseh is you have more of a Yetzer Hara, right? Once you're more commanded, right, then you have more Yetzer Hara. I don't know, should I not? You volunteer, you don't have a Yetzer Hara. The Maharal says a lot more what Sarah said, which is Godol HaMitzuvah, right? Once you're Mitzuvah, as opposed to volunteer, to say it in the most crass and creed way, you're worshiping yourself on a certain level. Making me feel good, I'm feeling good. Holech b'shrirut libi, making me feel good, as opposed to Godol HaMitzuvah, right? Which is going to be connected to what we're going to talk about in a second anyway, right? Mitzuvah is, by definition, I am a person who's commanded, and there's a creator, and I'm doing it as a result of the creation. The chiddush here, back to what Rav Chil Yaakov Weinberg was saying, is that even though most mitzvot gadol mitzvah v'oseh umevachin v'tzivanu b'mishloach manot tov she'itein miritzono hachofshi. It's better that you give it at because I want to do it out of your own free will. Mitoch regesh shel ahava le'achav ha'ivri. Right? Well, it's called spontaneous love. I want to give it. If I only give it because I'm commanded to, because asher kedishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu hu mafchit midat ha'ava. I'm actually lessening the midat ha'ava. V'chein b'tzedakah. Right? It's much better to give it out of ava more than sivoy and kfiyah. Okay? Yeah, in this case. In this case, specific to this mitzvah, we see something that I would not have ever said unless Rav Weinberg said it, that there is a mitzvah, which normally we would say is like lifestyle choices because I feel good about it, right? Says in certain mitzvot, and he wants to say maybe why, again, by Kibbut Avayim, he says maybe that's the exact same reason. He says, Efshar, Shemi Shum Kach Ein Mevarchin Al Kibbut Avayim also, right? Because it's got to be something that's coming from you. Part and parcel of the mitzvah is that it's got to come from you, a certain hakarat hatov, right? According to the Sefer HaChinuch, the whole concept's got to be your hakarat hatov. It's got to come from you. But if it's being knocked on your head from the Ribono Shel Olam, it's a certain problem. So we see possibly, at least two, the Sridiyation brought down two mitzvot, that there's a concept of doing mitzvot because of my ritzon nafshi, right? I think it's the right thing to do. Now again, that, I'm not saying that that's the way, don't leave the shiur now and saying, okay, secular morality, I'll do what I want. I'm not saying that. But we see two possible extremes here, right? Within, why am I doing mitzvot? What's the philosophy behind my mitzvot? Is it kasher tzivcha Hashem elokecha? And by the Sridiyation, we're saying again, he limits it, and I want to be fair, contextually, right? It says by specifically Mishloach Manot, but he also applies it to Kibbut Avayim also.